Well, thanks so much for having us. As you've probably noticed, most of us are getting older. And a group of about 6 of us got together, almost a year ago, and started talking about that. And what does it mean to get older in Vermillion? And are we going to still be mowing our lawn into our 90s? I have a friend in her 80s who somebody recently caught standing on her roof after the flood, trying to get stuff out of the gutters and off the roof. So we've been thinking about how do we want to live as we age. And Sandy and I are going to share what we learned and what we plan to do about it. There's a study done by the City of Vermillion in 2022, and most of you have already heard about it here, but I'll just remind you of a few things. We need 30 to 34 units for senior independent living. If you are not eligible for low-income senior housing, you got to move, right? You got to move. So the suggestion in the study, the recommendations included 30 to 34 units, community rooms, spacious corridors, fully accessible, open floor plans, private patios, 6 to 8 one-bedrooms, and 24 to 26 two-bedrooms, fully equipped kitchens, storage areas, laundry hookups, and so on. The study also recommended that the city offer tax increment financing, perhaps land donations or low-interest loans or some kind of subsidy in order to make these units affordable. What does affordable mean? Right? That's a hard question. Affordable in 2022 meant $275,000 to $425,000. Most people in Vermillion can sell their homes for, according to the Realtors Association, about $250,516. The cost for building per square foot in Vermillion over the past couple of years has been about $250 a square foot. So you just do a little math, right? $250 times, say 1,000 square feet, that's a small unit for an aging person without children. And, you're at $250,000 before you buy the land or anything else. So, all right, so why senior housing? Why can't we all just stay in our houses until we die? That's what we want to do, right? That's what we all want to do. But it's not very practical to think that way, right? At some point, driving becomes an issue. How do you get groceries? How do you get around? How do you go visit friends? How do friends come visit you when they can't drive anymore? Friends move away or die, and you've got the problem of loneliness. Loneliness has the same impact, according to the Surgeon General of the United States, as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day in terms of affecting longevity. And a lot of people need just a small amount of assistance, right, to stay independent for longer. So we came up with this idea of co-housing. And co-housing, let's see, we have a short slide talk that actually comes from the Cohousing Association of the United States that explains what co-housing is, because we figured you folks might not know. And co-housing is about living the good life while using less of the Earth's resources and having a good time doing it. And a lot of it is living in community. And did you want to do this part of it? Sure. Yeah.
So when I've been talking to the people who've been involved in this program so far, what I've learned is something that really appeals to me as a single person whose family all lives a very long way away. My daughter currently lives in South Korea, and my mom lives in California, and those are my two closest relatives in terms of like how, you know, the people that I really rely on. And so in talking to the people who've been involved with this in Vermillion, what we're really looking for is a community that provides the environment and the resources, the relationships, but also the personal space that's necessary for its members to flourish alone and together. So one of the things that cohousing really addresses is this issue of continuing in community with the people around us as we move into different phases of life. So why do we need community? Well, one of the first issues is that isolation and social isolation issues really abound in the United States. I'm an introvert, so when COVID hit, I was like, woohoo! But the reality is that social isolation has an enormous impact on our health and on our mental health and on our ability to thrive. A report from the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine tells us that more than 1/3 of adults aged 45 and older feel lonely. And nearly 1/4 of adults aged 65 and older are considered to be socially isolated. And that, of course, becomes even worse if the adult is suffering from any kind of mobility disability or hearing loss. So that social isolation is the first reason why we need community. The second reason is that we know that connection with other people leads to greater joy. Now, one of the things that I think is really interesting is a study that was done by a guy named Dave Smolin, where he was looking at how we respond to human interaction and connection. You know, it's not just about pure joy. Sometimes we make a connection with another person and it's not necessarily joyful. It may even be angry, or it may be anxiety-inducing, or it may be emotional in a different way. But what he discovered was that when we make connections with other human beings, regardless of the other emotions that are involved in it, there's a sense of uplift, right? There's a sense of having a weight sort of lifted off your shoulders and having a sense of spiritual sort of renewal. And you all know what that means, right? It's that moment when you've made a connection, just even walking across the campus with another person and they give you a smile. It makes a difference. And so we really want to encourage that sense of connection. And of course, connection leads to better health. Betty already referred to the Surgeon General study, but it's not just about smoking, right, and those types of effects. Social isolation significantly increases a person's risk of premature death from all causes, right, and that includes things like smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity. Social isolation is associated with about a 50% increase in risk of dementia. Right? As a person who can never remember her students' names, I am terrified of this. Poor social relationships, which is characterized by social isolation and loneliness, is associated with a 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. And loneliness is associated with higher rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. And when we care about our communities, we want to make sure that they are not suffering in this way. And this is another reason why we're really invested in this idea of co-housing. We've also identified compassion as an outgrowth of connection with other people. So this starts from the very beginning with co-housing, where we're working in a participatory process to decide how we're going to build our homes for the future. And that requires sitting down with our partners and fellow developers to think about, what do I need to have in my home as I age? What do I need to have to make myself safe and comfortable? What do I need to have around me so that my family can come and visit me and spend time with me safely in the community? And the reality is that when we feel safe, when we feel welcomed, and when we feel engaged with a community, our capacity to have compassion for other people grows. And you're Rotarians. You know the effect that compassion has had on your lives, and we want to share that with everybody who joins our co-housing community. And then, of course, connection creates personal growth. Obviously, living in relationship with others stretches our our boundaries a little bit. Like, I love living by myself because I don't have to, like, pick that thing up off the floor or eat that thing that you want to eat. I don't have to do anything I don't want to do, right? But the reality is that when we are encouraged to be in relationship with others, we can learn to be more fully ourselves and more fully grown. And finally, of course, co-housing leads to a more sustainable future. This is a thing that really sticks with me. My daughter and my mother and I had like a big year this year. My mom turned 70, I turned 50, and my daughter turned 30. And that 30, that was the killer right there. But one of the conversations that I had with her is she sat down with me and told me that she's decided not to have children. And no judgment, that's fine with me, but her reasons for not wanting to have children is that she feels that it's irresponsible given our environmental issues that we are dealing with in around the world. And I feel very strongly that I want to do my part to make sure that none of our children has to take the weight of the world on when they're making decisions about their personal lives. And what we know about co-housing is that when we have a community of sharing, when we have a community that's dedicated individually to sustainable living, then we can encourage that and enhance it throughout our communities.
So how does it work? Well, first, you bake interconnection between people into the architecture and the planning of the project. And then Sandy will talk a bit about practices of connection. The first principle is clustered housing. You actually cluster the housing, and part of the idea is that you meet people, right? If you've got clustered housing, just in the course of day-to-day business, you meet other people, and it makes a difference. This is a pretty typical sort of design for co-housing layout. Parking away from homes, and we're in South Dakota. That's a big issue. There are ways of creating parking such that you are able to connect with neighbors. The big problem seems to be parking where you go out of your house directly into your garage, into your car, and then you drive off somewhere and you come back and you go directly into your garage and into your home, and you never meet people. Well, there are ways of designing these communities that take into account South Dakota weather, which is huge, right? And for us, it's really all about safety, accessibility, and probably technology, like warming technology on pathways and so on, so there's no ice. Pedestrian streets are a really important part of this, right? So there's always a pedestrian connection, so people are running into each other. And common property. Most of these places have a large common garden, an organic vegetable garden, for example, and footpaths and so on. So people meet each other while they're getting their exercise. So each one also has a common house, and that is really the heart of these communities. And common house features include things like you saw patios, a dining room large enough for everybody and at least a bunch of their friends, a kitchen, a living room, where people can get together in the evening or in the afternoon to chat. Guest rooms, so you don't have to have those extra 2 bedrooms that only get used when your family comes to visit. There are guest bedrooms that you can, that your family can use and friends when they come to stay. And most of them have activity spaces like workshops. And that's also a place where people can get together and meet, sharing tools, sharing things like lawnmowers. So if you've got 25 units, you don't need 25 lawnmowers, right? You need one. Most of them have kids' rooms. Our plan is not to have kids' rooms, largely because we're targeted toward adults. and multi-purpose rooms where, and in particular, if you notice this shed on the left here, the members of our group, most of us kayak and cycle and cross-country ski, and I mean, all that equipment takes room, so there'll definitely be an equipment shed. Individual units are fully independent and private. They have private yards, private patios, mostly kitchens that face onto common areas, so that if somebody's outside enjoying life and you want to join them, you can. But if you want to spend the afternoon reading a book, you've got a covered patio in the backyard where you can do that. They're usually about 800 to 1,600 square feet. 1-2 bedrooms. Most places have common rooms, right? Some kind of common spaces. Usually people agree we're going to have dinner together once a week, say. I don't know, Sandy, do you want to?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the idea or the practices of connection, it's really just about intentionally making and maintaining the community, right? So you're going to be working really hard on breaking bread together when you can, on having, outings together when you can, on spending time in relationship with each other for all of the reasons that we've already sort of talked about. But of course, when you're living in that kind of community, it also requires that you have a good idea about how you are going to manage your living space and the way that your community works together. And so the basic idea in the sort of governing a community like this is something that's referred to as sociocracy. And simply stated, that's a system of self-governance that's based on principles of equality. And the idea here is that the community cultivates circles of responsibility. So you may have a group of people that's particularly interested in growing food, and so their circle of responsibility may be the community garden, right? And others who are really interested in landscaping, their circle of responsibility might be like taking care of the lawns and the sidewalks and everything like that. The idea here is that it is a group of people working to come to consensus on how we want to live together and working on consistent, constant growth as a community. And then, of course, self-management. So when we think about self-management of these, I mean, I think one of the things that, like, I've been watching this go on with my mom for the last couple of years. Like I said, she's 70, and in the last couple of years, she's had a quintuple bypass, right? And so that left her feeling really, really dispirited and really alone and really struggling to get things done every day. But what it also left her with was children who are like constantly like, Mom, you're getting old, right? You got to go do the, you got to come here and live with it, and disrespecting her independence and her autonomy in ways that have been very, very difficult for her to cope with. And so when we're talking about self-management, we're talking also about maintaining independence and responsibility for your community in a way that allows you to be engaged with responsibility. And I think that's really
see, so I think Sandy talked a bit about this culture of sharing, the idea of not having 25 lawnmowers, but having one. So just to kind of bring you up to date with where we are now, we are considering a development of 20 to 30 units, and maybe 800 to 1,200 square feet each. Designed for seniors, so universally accessible, but not limited to them. I know there are a few young faculty members who would really, really like to join us. We'll incorporate the basic elements of cohousing, including this sociocracy. We've gone to visit a few of these places, and because, we weren't going to be all in until we know, well, wait, how does this work? Like, do people really like this? Do they fight? I mean, like, what are their board meetings like? And so we went to visit a bunch of these places. Becky and Diane went to North Carolina. I went up to Minnesota, over to Iowa to visit, and they work pretty well. I mean, there's just a lot of really happy people there who enjoy being together. At one place, by the end of the day, they had given us an all-day tour, and by the end of the day, there were a bunch of people having happy hour together on somebody's screened-in porch, and they yelled out, "Bye, South Dakota!" It was, so people really do spend time together, but they also have private spheres, which is, I mean, I couldn't live with a place where I didn't have my private space. I mean, I'm a reader. I enjoy my alone time. We are actively seeking 3 to 7 acres of land, and we've been working with the VCDC on that, and they've been incredibly helpful. We're so grateful for their assistance. We're talking to a development consultant who will guide us through to the groundbreaking process. She has built. She's also an architect as well as a developer, and she's built. What I think she said 55 of these communities across the United States, and is willing to help us. And we expect the debut of our website and Facebook page, as well as public events over the next month or two. So that's where we are, and we'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
So how does ownership work? Do they own the units? What happens when?
Yeah, so the day that construction is finished, every member takes control of their own unit and signs an HOA, which is basically a condominium association agreement. So you're a limited liability corporation for building, and then as soon as the building is done, you become a condominium association with an HOA.
How do you handle expenses for the common areas?
Yeah, so that goes into an HOA fee, a monthly, sort of condominium fee. So the expenses of the entire place, and some of those expenses, we recently went to a conference on cohousing, and they showed us before and after budgets, right? So people living in their 2,500 square foot house versus people living in cohousing. And what happens is energy costs are much lower. Things like internet are done for the entire organization, and so many of your costs become lower. Your heating, things like heating bills and cooling are much cheaper. And the other thing is that you're much less likely to go out and spend a lot on a fancy dinner, because you have a community to have dinner with. So it's, yeah. Did I answer your question, Mike?
Yes, I'm just going through the Florida fear experience where they didn't have sufficient fees to pay for routine maintenance.
Yeah. And routine maintenance is generally done by, like in sociocracy, there is a maintenance circle, and there'll be just a handful of people whose responsibility is to make sure that maintenance is kept up. And then, of course, you've got your formal board of directors as well. Yeah.
So which family or person will buy and sell their own unit?
Yes.
In a way they can sell it.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, you have private ownership of your unit, and I actually checked in with a couple of bankers, and they're no issues there in terms of financing.
Are the rules that there's no renters?
No, there will be. I think in the HOA there would probably be limitations on rentals, but no. Yeah. Dan.
My experience with most of these, as far as relatives, is usually they're under like one big roof or whatever, and kind of individual apartments, and they have the common area and stuff. So, obviously, there's a little bit more individuality in the actual individual houses and stuff, but it seems like it'd be a lot cheaper with one big roof or whatever. I mean,
yeah, where we are right now, and of course this is a project that's still in formation. We have an architect, but until we have land, we don't have a design. So what What we're thinking about right now is fourplexes, which is kind of a, so they're much more energy, they're much better on energy usage, but, it's not one great big apartment building with a lot of, so everybody has separate entrances, front and back. Yeah.
I know your example was probably not necessarily all in the pictures, but here, wouldn't you insist on covered parking lots?
I think we would have to, that's my opinion, and we've had a lot of discussions on parking, and I think, a covered, maybe even covered areas adjacent to every house is the kind of thing we're thinking about. But on pedestrian walkways, we've actually thought a bit about, using that heat technology within the cement to make it more navigable. So I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more ice scares me, walking up and down the street. Yeah. Other questions?
What do you think the cost of the initial unit would be?
Yeah, there's no way to know that until we have a design. Right now, if construction costs held as they've been over the last year, you'd probably be looking at $275,000, $300,000 a unit, and a lot depends on the cost of the land. Construction prices have just inched slightly lower for the first time this past month, and I am really excited about that. So, one of the things you do to make it more affordable is you build one kind of unit. You build one kind of one-bedroom, one-bath unit, one kind of two-bedroom, two-bath units. You use sameness, basically, to keep costs down. Things like having fourplexes instead of elevators and so on, that keeps costs down. So we've done a study of affordability, and we're really hoping to keep it well within that, at the lower end of the affordable range. Yeah. Kelsey?
How many people do you have as part of your group right now, and how many people are you hoping to recruit ultimately?
Yeah, so we have 6 folks who are committed, and we've got a list of about 40 who are interested, and we will keep expanding that list. We're working with a couple of firms who do marketing. One does exclusively senior co-housing marketing. And we expect that some people will come from the coasts, because that's the history of every co-housing development in the Midwest. So we are hoping to get as many people from Vermillion involved as we can, but then after that we'll go a little farther. We'll go a little farther afield. Yeah. Other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. What you said about parking really struck a chord with me. I remember growing up, my dad telling me that he had managed to go from our house in suburban Cincinnati, like getting in the car in our garage, all the way to Tokyo without ever having gone outside. So that, yeah. So anyway. So, thank you to our speakers, to our guests, Sandy and Diane and Becky. Good to see you. And Audra. Oh, she left. Okay. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Thanks again to Greg and Ted for helping organize the event today, and for everyone who volunteered for my class. That will be very, very helpful. We didn't do a sergeant at arms. Do we still do a 50-50? Okay. All right. Draw these.